I occasionally think how quickly our differences worldwide would vanish if we were facing an alien threat from outside this world. And yet I ask you, is not an alien force already among us?
From the gates of Mount Rome to the far corners of the endless highway, wherever you are, welcome to the show.
So you believe in some kind of Armageddon?
Yeah, most definitely. We in the last times and days right now. The Illuminati's in effect.
My guest today is the host of the Josh Monday Christian and Conspiracy podcast. He has been featured on here before, but this is like the first official episode. So Josh, thanks for coming on, man.
No problem. Thank you. Yeah, so it's Josh Monday Christian and Conspiracy podcast on audio platforms. It's Josh Monday Music and Podcast on YouTube, and also on Occult and Conspiracy. If you go to their site, every Sunday and Wednesday, I drop an episode of Sunday service episode and then a Wednesday service. And those episodes are all Bible study. And I'm already to the book of Mark on the New Testament on Wednesday service. And I'm all the way to the book of Numbers on, midway through the book of Numbers on the Old Testament. So we've already gone through Genesis, Leviticus and so we've been kind of crushing it lately. So It's good stuff.
Are those 2 hours each, Sunday and Wednesday, or is 2 hours each?
Yeah, 2 hours. Yeah,
Wow,
a Bible
man.
study. Yeah, so that's a blessing.
You're going to be very, not that you weren't already, but you're going to be very knowledgeable when it comes to scripture the more you do this. And I know that you already were, but I mean, having to hammer out 4 hours a week of Bible-based content, I can't imagine doing it. I feel like my spiritual game would be heavily elevated.
Oh yeah, the thing is, when I was doing the Josh Monday Christian and Conspiracy podcast only, it was like a conspiracy show where I was sprinkling Bible verses in, right? So it was sometimes we would do like an all Christian show, yes, but most of the time it's conspiracy, and then I'd show how it relates to the Bible. That was different. Now, since it's all Bible, it's I used to get more spiritually attacked before, and it was harder to fight against the enemy, right? But faith comes by hearing, and by hearing by the word of God. So as I'm studying for 2 days straight for Wednesday service, 2 days straight for the Sunday service, and then I'm doing this 2 shows, 6 of my days are covered by doing Bible. The 1 day that I have of rest, basically, it's almost like the Sabbath. It's crazy. It's actually working that way. So it is assisting me, like it's really assisting me in a way that I can't even explain. It's a blessing. Not saying that I don't get attacked still. It's just, It's different. It's different now. I feel it.
Okay. I just had a question just kind of come to mind, and I am curious about this. How much extra biblical stuff do you get into as part of your research?
I do. Okay. So here's what I do on that show. I do go a little bit into extra biblical text. The reason being is I'm teaching for an audience that are conspiracy minded. It's called Cult and Conspiracy, and a lot of these people are not. They don't go to church, So, but if I'm going to explain anything that's extra biblical, then I'm going to tell them this is where I'm getting the information from. This is the source I'm getting it from, and it's only if it's pertaining to a part of the Bible, like the Tower of Babel, like in the Book of Jasher, or Nimrod. Book of Jasher, and I'm going to tell them, or Josephus, his writings, like I'm going to tell them, this is where it's coming from. And if you ever heard this before, it's not coming from the Bible. So I just want to make sure people know that, because a lot of people, they hear things and they think that they got that from the Bible. because they don't really read the word as much, and then all of a sudden they find out later, like I did, like, oh, that was actually not in the Bible. So pastors are preaching things in church that are a little bit stuff they maybe heard from Josephus, a little bit stuff they maybe heard from the book of Jasher, and then they're preaching on the Tower of Babel. But I never hear them saying like, hey, I got this from here and I got this from there. So when I was teaching about the Tower of Babel personally on that show, I was like, okay, I thought that Nimrod goes up there to try to kill God with a bow. Like that's what I heard, that that's the whole reason why the Tower of Babel was built. But then I read in the Bible, it doesn't say that, right? That's coming from Josephus and the book of Jasher, extra biblical text. So I just want to tell people it's important for you to go through and don't let your pastor lead you, and make sure whatever you hear from your pastor, you go home and you read as well. Like you, because it's important, vastly important for us to do that, because if we're depending on a man to teach us, then they have 5013C. They have certain things that are holding them back from teaching certain things that I might be able to teach on a podcast, like we're
Yeah,
going over
yeah.
today. For
Yeah, yeah.
example, we're going over Genesis 6, right? I mean,
Right. Well, I figured that we would get into that. You said Nimrod there, and I think a lot of people make the association with Gilgamesh, and
yeah.
well, two things before I touch on that. I noticed recently on an app that I use a lot, one of the most common phrases that was typed into the app, like search phrases, was history of the Bible. I thought, oh, that's interesting. And then I remembered like people were saying a few years ago that Nephilim was the top Google search for like a year there. So I just want to say I really think that these topics are on people's minds, and I think like the most recent stuff that comes to mind for me that's very weird and very enigmatic is like Gilgamesh slash the Clinton emails, because
Mm,
you have people in government using that word Nephilim in those emails. Like it's like the State Department 2018 emails that says something about we're requesting documents pertaining to the resurrection chamber of Gilgamesh. And they were like, we want the location of his body and the location of the buried Nephilim. So I thought that that was crazy. Like this is in the culture in a big way, whether we're
yeah.
talking giants, Nephilim, or whatever you want to call them.
Yeah. Yeah. And the thing about it is think about it from an aspect of before the flood, like there was a reason why God even did the flood in the first place. So, it was getting out of control. The DNA was getting spread
Yes.
so rapid and so wide. Because if you're like a woman that's looking for security, like back then, like you're looking for a hunter, you're looking for a gatherer, you're looking for someone that's gonna be able to protect you. Because if you're a woman, bro, you're vulnerable back then. Like imagine being on a tribe and you guys are nomads walking, like you're very vulnerable as a woman. You need a man that can step up and do something for you. So you can imagine how the women would be attracted to the larger people like that, and I just think that that DNA spread out wild, like a wildfire, right? So
Mhm.
that's why I think in the Bible it says that Noah was perfect in his generations. Like that
Yes.
doesn't mean that Noah was perfect like Jesus. He did walk with God and he was a righteous man, but he was perfect in his genealogy. He was perfect in his genealogy, meaning he didn't have that Nephilim DNA. So
Right.
God and all these atheists out there are going to come at you and just be like, well, God flooded the earth and killed all these people. And in the book of Numbers, he wanted to kill the men, women, and children of this tribe. And like people, they don't understand the whole entire story because they're just picking little verse here and there. And they're like, the God of the Old Testament is different than Jesus because he did. So we got to understand the full story
Yeah,
to
and
be
that's
able to go
why.
into this kind of stuff.
Yeah, absolutely, man. And that's why I think these extra biblical texts are important, because they help to paint a picture. They help you see a bigger picture, actually, like Dead Sea Scrolls. Um, that comes out in 1947. But before that, in 1928, you had the ancient cuneiform texts in Syria that they're calling the Ugaritic texts now. They talk a lot about giants, Rephaim, and there's references in the Ugaritic texts that say that giants could heal themselves and heal others. So
That's what
they weren't
Rapha
totally
Rapha means.
human.
That's what Rapha means. Rapha means heal, right? So
Really?
Raphaim would be healing. Yeah. So they'd be like a
Okay.
healer. But so
That's
yeah,
cool.
there's so
But
I
here,
think
but
it's
here's the point I should have made. I'm sorry.
oh sorry, my bad.
No, no, I
Go
should have
ahead.
added it in. I think that a lot of scholars that I've read say that the biblical parallels with the Ugaritic and the Bible itself is uncanny. It's like it lines up very well. So
Mhm.
that's why I see that with the book of Enoch and Genesis 6 as well. I think that
Yeah, there's yeah.
when I read the book of Enoch, man, like my understanding of what happened or what was going on in Genesis just went through the roof. I'm like, oh, I see now. It's like it was like I saw it for the first time, actually.
Yeah, and in that verse, the Genesis 6:4 verse, and compared to Book of Enoch, Enoch, instead of using sons of God, he uses sons of heaven. So you know that they're not talking about the sons of Seth at that moment, because that's what people try to do, which I'll get into. Where they try to say that like it's Seth's line, those are the
Hmm.
sons of God, and then the daughters of Cain. You know what I mean?
I
So
do.
it's
Yeah, some pastors will make the argument that when it says the sons of God came down to Mount Hermon, that it wasn't talking about supernatural beings or fallen angels or watchers, right? They're trying to say it was some sort of a line of kings or something like that.
yeah.
Or they're
So
humans, right?
yeah, what it is it says it came to pass when this is the passage, so it's Genesis 6 1 through 4. And it came to pass when men began to multiply on the face of the earth, and daughters were born unto them, that the sons of God saw the daughters of men that were fair, and they took them as wives, in which they chose. For and God said, oh, okay, hold on. That's one sentence. And it says, Then God said, Let my spirit shall not strive with man. Hold on. Let me go to, oh, yeah, okay, I'll continue. For it says, Also his flesh, yet his days shall be numbered to 120 years. There were giants in the earth in those days, and also after that, when the sons of God came into the daughters of men, and they bare children to them, the same became mighty men which are of old, and the men of renown. So what they're trying to say is this is what they're taught in seminary schools as well. This is what they're teaching now. They're teaching that the sons of God right there that came into the daughters of men were actually the sons of Seth, and then the daughters of men were actually like the daughters of Cain. And what they're saying is they're intermingling, and that's and the Bible doesn't even say not to do that until you get to like Abraham and all that, right? So first of all. Second of all, if you look through the whole entire Old Testament, you don't see anything about sons of God being people. Only in the New Testament do you see that. And what you see is Jesus saying that we could become adopted sons of God. But the only people that are sons of God or things that are the sons of God, I don't mean people are, sorry, are a direct creation from God. So Adam would be a son of God, right? Jesus is a son of God.
Right.
I think Jesus is God, but I'm just giving you guys an example because he's a direct creation of God in the womb, right?
Mhm.
And then you see that, and I'm not saying that Jesus was created, I'm talking about when he was in the womb. And then you see like angels, those are direct creations from God. So those are going to be sons of God. And throughout the whole entire Old Testament, you see it in Job 1:6, you see it in Job 2:1, where the sons of God came to present themselves and Satan was with them as well.
Yeah, they're
You also see
angels.
it, yeah, you also see it in the book of Daniel where it says son of God. It looks like the son of God in the fire when they're saving Meshach and Abednego and Daniel and all
Yes.
that stuff. So um,
You
you're
know what's
not.
interesting? My version, my Bible actually says that the Nephilim were on the earth in those days.
Yeah, yeah. That's the reason
It's
why is because the New King James and the King James are going to both use giants. But if
hmm
you look in the NIV or other texts, they're going to use the word Nephilim, and that word
Yep.
Nephilim, it means earthborn, right? It's Nephal is basically the Hebrew word, and H5303, and it's giants, or the Nephilim is what the definition is. But it also means earthborn, right? So they're not born in the image of God, right? So what I would do on my presentation, since we're going all over because we like to talk, man, we love it, dude. And so you see in Genesis 1:26, what you're seeing is let us make man in our image according to our likeness. Let them have dominion over the fish in the sea. So God is basically saying that he made us in his image. Anything that's not made in his image they're not going to be savable. You see what I mean? So that's why you see like Genesis 3:15 and through 13 through 15. That's why you kind of see this cosmic battle that starts, right? And let me read it real quick. It's this is Satan. This is God talking to Satan and saying, all your days of your life, I will put enmity between you and the woman, and between your seed and her seed. He shall bruise your heel, and you shall bruise his heel. So the interesting part about this to me is that it says that Satan has a seed, and he is an angel. So he's going to be able, a seed means that you can have offspring, right? So I think that's interesting. That's kind of letting you know that angels have the ability to procreate. And Satan, what he thought, I believe, is he thought, okay, so Eve is going to have this, this seed, Cain and Abel. So what he did is say, hey, Cain was firstborn, Abel is second. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to try to have Cain kill Abel. And that's what he did. He basically, he pushed the whole entire narrative. He noticed that Abel was sacrificing correctly. Cain wasn't. So we came in. I think he started tempting him to do what he did and attack her family right away, because he thinks that Abel's the Messiah, and God was showing favor to Abel and not to Cain, right? And throughout the Bible, you see, I don't want to get off subject.
I agree.
You see the secondborn. You see the secondborn being the one that get the birthright, and not the first.
Okay.
So Satan even saw that back then.
Yeah.
So,
I think Cain. I think that the serpent seed goes back to Cain as well.
okay, what I mean, so
Is that not what you meant?
No. What I mean here is this. I mean that Satan is able to have a seed. I'm not saying that Satan had sex with Eve. I know that some people say that.
No. Okay.
Okay.
That's not what I'm saying.
What I'm saying.
I'm talking about
is that
I'm talking about like the metaphoric seed of Satan.
Yeah.
Is starting with Cain, not necessarily with the Watchers.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So I go back to this verse just to point out two things. First thing is that God is saying that Satan has a seed, and Satan is an angel, right? And then I also go back to this verse because he knows that a Messiah is going to be born, whether it's Cain and Abel, like right away, or if it's in the future, which he didn't know. He already started attacking the family right away. But I understand what you're saying too, Tim, like metaphorically, that Satan's seed started with Cain, because dude, even the seven sacred sciences come from Cain's family. All these different things come from his family. I totally understand that. The metaphor part, yes. And I also want to point out that Satan and God right away, like that cosmic battle. As soon as he said that, Satan was like, okay, now I need to watch for a Messiah that's going to bruise my heel. So he immediately started attacking. And then what was his response? Personally, I believe that his response was to entice these angels to have sex with these women. And then what it does is, once they did that, they had sex, and then they had Nephilim. Now that DNA is now earthborn.
It's literally serpent seed at this point.
Yeah, literally, like now it's an angel that came from heaven, shed its okateri in its heavenly body, came down and had sex with human women, which is like a complete no, bro. Okay, that's a no. That's a no-go. I'll just say that. All right. So
I got a hard question for you though.
Yes, sir.
So yes, I don't necessarily think that the serpent seed started with Cain. I think metaphorically it did, because when I first found out about Genesis 3:15 and got my head wrapped around it, I was like, oh, this is the seed. This is the enmity between the serpent and the woman. That's what this act, when they come down and they do this with human women, that's when it started. But then I started looking into Cain, and like you said, Cain, Enoch, you have the mystery schools that come out of that line. and like it seems like there's like a dark witchcraft aspect to a lot of that as well. And so I thought, wow, maybe the serpent seed goes back to Cain, like it goes back to the garden actually, maybe metaphorically, right? But also, here's my question for you: what if? Well, who do you think Cain started that civilization with? He would have needed a woman.
Well, there's a few different theories there. One of the theories would be that, you know, obviously Adam and Eve lived for 900 something years, right? So there had to be incest happening if those are the first two humans. Um, the other aspect of that would be some people believe in on day six, God created man and women, like created them, and then they started living, and then Cain and Abel, and I mean, I'm sorry, Adam and Eve were created separate. I personally believe that Adam and Eve were the first people. I don't believe that, but there's different aspects of that thought. But I believe that probably they had kids, and then they started having kids and having kids, and then Cain probably went to another land or whatever where there was other people, and I think they were just procreating, because if you have 300 years of a generation, then there's
Yeah,
going to be a lot of people on the earth. That's
I
what I
hear
would
you.
say.
I
So
hear you.
just
And
a
no, that's, I mean,
personal opinion.
yes. I wonder, didn't he say too that he was in danger of being killed once he left?
He did, yeah.
'Cause
But also, one thing I want to
that,
say though is Cain was actually, the Bible says that the Lord gave them a child, and it was Cain. So when people try to say like they do use that, hey, well, Satan had sex with Eve and all that stuff,
oh yeah,
like
yeah.
that, like what I would say is it literally says that God provided, gave them a child. The Lord provided him with Cain, and
Mhm.
also the penalty for having sex with a human from an angel is to be put in a bottomless pit and be chained. Okay, so God's not going to allow Satan to have sex with a woman and then have a child and then be like, all right, you can just continue to roam the land. You see
Mhm.
what happens. It's extensive because God did not want any other angel to ever do that in history again. Didn't want any angel to come down and have sex with women ever again. So
Yeah.
that's what I mean. You see that the penalty was fierce, right? So, but
Hmm.
so we kind of already went over Genesis 6:4. One thing I do want to do before we get too much into the book of Genesis is I want to validate it, right? I want to validate the book of Genesis. So in John 5:46, Jesus says, if you don't believe the words of Moses, you will not believe my words. That's one thing. So Jesus validates Moses right there. And then we have Numbers 12 verses 4-8, where Aaron and Miriam, what they're trying to do is they're basically trying to say, like, why is Moses so special? Don't you speak through us as well? And God is telling them, listen, I come to prophets in visions and in dreams, but when I come to Moses, I speak to him face to face and mouth to mouth. He's basically checking them to a point where Miriam actually got leprosy for trying to ask God this and try to be prideful. Basically, what she's trying to say is, why, this is Aaron and Miriam are both brother and sister, and then Moses, they're like, how come he's so special? Is what they're saying, and God is saying, listen, I speak to him face to face and mouth to mouth. Mouth to mouth is in the King James, face to face is in the New King James. So that validates the book of Genesis because it's coming from somebody first of all, it's a firsthand account from God because Moses is not alive during that time. Also, it's coming from a source that spoke to God face to face and mouth to mouth. Does that make sense?
You talking about who wrote the book of Genesis?
Yeah, yeah, Moses. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Moses, yeah, yeah. So
So
Moses, you're saying it was like revealed to him.
what I'm saying is it validates the book of Genesis, like because it's coming from Moses, right? And Moses was able to speak to God.
Hmm.
God even says that the Lord is speaking, saying he spoke to him face to face. So the information that we're receiving is coming from God, right? It's like
Hmm.
when I read the book of Genesis, I just want to let people know it's an authoritative word
Yeah.
because Moses was not alive. So he has to be when God is saying he created the heavens and the earth, like Moses is not like just writing down whatever he wants. He's actually getting that information straight from God, right? When he's talking about like Genesis 6:4 happening, this is information that he's getting straight from God. When he's talking about Adam and Eve said this, Adam said this, Satan said this. How was Moses going to know that? it has to be coming from God, right? A
Sure.
firsthand account from him. So I
Absolutely.
just want to let people know that. So when I read the Bible, I read it like it's literal, like it's authoritative word of God. I take it like serious, and I'm very passionate about it. So I like to at least tell people like why am I passionate about it when I see verses like that in the book of Exodus. It also says that the Lord's speaking and saying, I speak to Moses like a friend. Like it's beautiful. And I know that the Lord came to Abraham before and he spoke to him as well, face to face, when before they went to Sodom and Gomorrah. But I just want to let you guys know, like, Moses wrote the book of Genesis, so I think it kind of just validates that. And also the prophets that we read about, it validates them too, because the visions and the dreams came straight from God. God says, I come to them in visions and in dreams. So I just want to let you guys know it kind of validates the Bible more, you know.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
So okay,
Where
so we
where
were
do you usually go from here? Because I don't want to throw us off too much because I could take
it's
it.
all good. We kind of already we kind of already okay. Here's another thing about Satan's seed. I'll go real quick. There's also some people that believe that Satan's seed will be the Antichrist, right? And that Satan is going to literally hook up with a person and have the Antichrist. That's going to be like Ryan Peterson's. That's going to be his lane, not mine. But just to let you guys know, and it's called The Final Nephilim. It's a book that he wrote. That's just some of his research that he feels, which would be insane and pretty crazy. Like, you know, Satan actually hooking up with the human and then having the Antichrist. But that's one of the
Does he think that that's going to be done through some type of artificial insemination or technology or something like that?
does I don't know if he gets. I haven't read the whole book because I
Okay.
don't have the time to. But all I'm saying is that's one of the theories that are
Yeah,
out there,
yeah.
that seed
Sure.
right there that we talked about could be a literal seed that's coming, that the Antichrist will be born from, right? And then obviously after the Antichrist is, like, you know, slayed and then he comes back to life, that's when Satan would actually literally enter him, right? So depending on your eschatology, because some people eschatology is different, right? They might think that that stuff has already taken place, or we're in Satan's season,
Right.
or there's just a whole bunch of eschatology out there. So if you don't have that eschatology, I'm just letting you guys know that that's some research that he has done, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we kind of went there. We already talked about Genesis 6:4, which is like the bread and butter verse biblically of the Nephilim, right? And them being around. Um
Oh, can I say this too? This weekend, I browsed through, for the first time, I browsed through the Book of Giants. And I am no expert on it. Like, I've never read it before. And I was like, I felt like it's time for me to read this. So I browsed through some of it. I'm going to go back through and just read it more in depth and give it more of my time and try to like let it soak in. But it is crazy. It's like Genesis 6 with like turned into like Lord of the Rings, like
like
like a
like
big
a mic
long
almost
three
like
hour movie.
a
Yeah,
microscope on that whole entire thing, right?
yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it makes it seem like there was way more because that comes out of the Dead Sea Scrolls as well. I just want to remind people it's you know, but anyway, I'm not going to try to like overly validate it, but I do think that these writers of the Bible were into some of these extra biblical texts, like Enoch for sure, and maybe the Book of Giants. But it just seemed like there's a lot more of this stuff happening. Like there were more angels around, there was more DNA there were Nephilim everywhere. It just made it seem like Lord of the Rings, like big time.
Yeah. Yeah,
It's
and it
crazy.
seems, yeah, and it seems that like Moses, when he wrote that, he would think that the people that are going to be reading the Bible would already know that there was Nephilim,
Yes.
and that it just he doesn't need to explain it
Yep.
because we need it. We're like, what is this? That's why it was such a Google thing, because
Right.
first of all, I love when something that you read in the Bible challenges what the narrative is or what people in science would try to say it is. That's what I personally I enjoy that. And then when you look at people, you know, would say, I don't know 100% if this is true, but they say the Smithsonian actually hides giant bones, and like when they do find it in a site, they try to like put it to the side. I don't know if it's true, and I don't want to say 100% if it is, but it seems that it's something they don't want to come out because they don't want to validate the Bible, obviously,
Something
right?
happened, man. There's
Yeah,
I
yeah.
looked into the giant
I
thing. I
agree.
stumbled on it, man, and I didn't do it. I think people who are not Christians have this perception that Christians want there to be giants so they can prove the Bible. But so I didn't come at it that way. I wasn't trying to prove the Bible. In fact, I don't really go out of my way to try and prove the Bible or stick up. I think it does it does a good job of that on its own. You
I
know,
do too.
it's been doing great for thousands of years. The Bible doesn't need me to step up and make arguments for it. But there's something to the giants.
There
There
is,
was
bro. Yeah.
800 plus. I've talked to three people who on their own found 700 to 800 accounts of giant but skeletons being dug up and other pieces of evidence. There's something happened here, man. And like
Yep.
maybe we could get into this later, but it seems like maybe this goes into that men of renown part. It's a Genesis
Oh yeah, yeah. The
6. So, and I know you read it before, but I just want to throw it in
Go
here
ahead,
again.
brother.
When the sons of God went into the daughters of men, and you did a great job of breaking down sons of God. When these watcher angels went into the daughters of men, they bore children to them. They were the heroes that were of old, warriors of renown. And it just makes me think like, when you look at that part in the Ugaritic and what you said about Raphaim, it means to heal. Like they could heal themselves, they could heal other people. This paints the picture for me that we would call this superpowers today. This is like comic book stuff. Like they
Yeah.
had superpowers. And I just think that's wild because I think that's how they got to become famous in the land. I think they were famous like far and wide because there are these giants with superpowers. And I don't know. I think that that's a really key element here to grasp.
It isn't. It's something that you could attract people if you're in a church and you're a pastor. Like you can bring the Bible alive with this because as you continue to go through, you can understand why certain events are happening and why God is so like you hear it a lot like we're even like in Genesis 15 like there's a 5 king 4 king war and when that ends it's like Sodom Gomorrah is involved, the Raphaim are involved, and these people are involved, and Abraham's involved as well, right? And what you're hearing is even at the end of that, God says, "But I am not through with the Amorites." And the Amorites are king of Bashan, which are a giant tribe. So God is saying, "I'm not through with these people yet." And then as you continue to go, you see like the Tower of Babel happen, and
Hmm.
you see like Sodom and Gomorrah happen, and you're seeing that Sodom and Gomorrah are fighting neck like right next side by side with Raphaim, which are
Hmm.
like giants, right? So you're seeing certain things and like then you like dig into Sodom and Gomorrah, for example, and I'm going off track and stuff where I go, but it's okay. You go into Sodom and Gomorrah, for example, right? And you're kind of like, what happened with Sodom and Gomorrah, bro? Like, think about this. The Lord came down, spoke to Abraham, and he had two angels with him. And he stayed with Abraham and he ate with Abraham and he sent his two angels. And it says, I want to go make sure that that city is doing what has been reported to me. And he's sending the two angels. The two angels come, start walking, and Lot is up there on the he's in a position like a city council would be because he wouldn't
Yes.
be in the front and he wouldn't be somewhere where so he's kind of high up in the city and he's looking and he sees these two men, but they're two angels coming and they were probably you could probably tell they were angels. But what I'm saying here is in the meantime you have Abraham speaking to God and basically trying to say, hey, uh if you find 50 righteous, if you find 40, you find 30. He's literally speaking to God, like, please, like, if he wants to save Lot, his cousin,
Yeah.
basically. That's the
Yeah.
main thing he wants to do. And God is saying, I can't find five. What if
Right.
can't even find five righteous? So while that's happening, these angels are entering the city, and Lot greets them, bows down to them, like basically just goes like basically like to worship them or whatever, get up and Lot immediately treats them kindly and tells them, "Hey, where are you going to be sleeping tonight? Because he doesn't want them to sleep in the city, because he knows that all these evil people are going to try to come at them, right, and try to get with them. And that's what I'm seeing. I'm not just seeing them try to attack them, but
Hey,
they literally are lusting for these angels, right?
right.
So
He didn't want them to sleep in like the town square out in the open. He wanted them to
yes,
be behind a locked door, it seemed like.
he wanted them, and he was, so first of all, it's a test, because Lot is being tested to see if he is righteous, because at the same time God is speaking to Abraham, and then Lot is passing these tests, and then Lot brings him in the house, and what does he do? He locks the door, he offers him a meal, and these angels start eating with him and drinking. I mean, bro, first of all,
Right,
angels don't
right,
need to eat, don't need to
right.
drink. So these are angels in physical form.
Yep.
And these men are coming, knocking on the door, trying to pound the door down and saying, bring these men out that are in your house. And Lot comes out and trying to tell them, hey, trying to basically negotiate with them. And
Well, hey, one thing real quick. The fact that they took physical form and manifested into a human body somehow, that alone explains how a Genesis 6 situation could happen where these angels could come down and impregnate a human woman. I just want to throw
that
that
tells
in.
you, yeah, and that means, just like, yeah, and we'll get into that too, because we're going to get into the book of Jude, where it talks about them shedding their Occultarian, right?
Okay.
And that tells you that, and it also tells you that the men in the city were attracted to angels for some reason, so
Hmm.
much that Lot says, hey, instead of you trying to get with these men, I will give you my virgin daughters, and they denied it. So the angels, they blinded them. All of them were blind, right? He blinded all the men so they can't see. But they said they were lusting so much after these angels that they were trying to still find the door. So it was like they
This
were
chaos.
encapsulated with trying to hook up with these angels. So, and when you get into the book of Jude, it's first of all, it's talking about what happened to the giant, I'm not the giants, but what happened to the angels that sinned, and then it goes into Sodom and Gomorrah. So it talks about the flood, and then it talks about Sodom and Gomorrah. So, and it talks about these people in the city going after strange flesh. And the people normally take that as sodomy, right?
Right.
That's people going after gays. That's what it's
Right.
about. And that's what they try to hit on. But strange flesh means non-human. Okay? So I believe in Sodom and Gomorrah they were doing something way more than just sodomy. Yes, there was sodomy in the land, but they had to be doing something so bad that the Lord is on earth. I believe that's Yeshua the Mashiach, that's Jesus. It says the Lord talked to the Lord to send fire and brimstone on the city. It has to be so intense that God is getting involved. Now, when does God get involved? Well, God got involved with the flood,
When
right?
the
God got
DNA,
involved.
when they start messing with DNA and they
There you
start
go, bro.
bastardizing
Exactly,
God's
bro.
pure creation. I've
Yes.
never heard this take before either. This is pretty cool.
Yeah. So now everybody talks about a second incursion. Like, where did that happen? Where did that occur? It's a possibility if there was ever a second incursion and it did happen, it might have happened in Sodom and Gomorrah. That's why you see the
Ah,
Raphaim and the Sodom and Gomorrah fighting side by side. Maybe, maybe not. But I
yeah.
know that they were doing something ritually or something that was way bigger than just having sex, men having sex with men, because that
Hmm.
was happening all over the place. I
Yeah.
mean, you might not think so, but that's just something that, look at, dude, North Hollywood, San Francisco, it's all over. And God
Right.
is
Yeah.
not sending Jesus to come speak to the mayor and sending fire and brimstone on the city.
Yeah, that's a
Something
good
was
point.
bigger there, right? So,
That's a good
and
point. Can we just, I just want to lay out for people that
go
term
ahead.
second incursion. Basically, they're, so when God sent the flood, the thought is he wiped everybody out but Noah and his family. How, so how does the Nephilim bloodline show back up after
Exactly.
that? That's
Yes.
what people call the second incursion for people listening. It's like,
Thanks for
AKA,
doing that.
how did yeah, man, no
Just in
problem.
case.
If the
You're
flood
right.
killed Noah, everyone except Noah and his family, how did giants show back up with Numbers 13, essentially?
Yeah. So this
I have
is
a thought on that too, but we can get to it in a minute.
yeah, yeah. So there's the Sodom and Gomorrah was one that I was like, when I was reading it and I was kind of going through extra biblical text and I was going through it, I was thinking there's got to be more to this, bro. I've
Mm,
always been told about the homosexual sex, which is like that's probably what's going on. Obviously, there was men trying to hook up with men, and even when there was a woman offered to them, they still wanted to go with the men or
yeah,
the
yeah.
angels. But there's that. But there's another thing that some people believe about how did that get through, and that would be Ham's wife, because Ham's came through the land of Canaan, right? That's where his line ended up going to, and that's where all the giants were located, right? And so they think that maybe Ham's wife had that DNA, and then they hooked up, and then
Hmm.
that's why Nimrod became a. There's a whole bunch of
Well,
stuff
yeah,
to it.
yeah. That's what got me
What's your
thinking
thoughts
about
though,
it.
Tim? Tell me.
Well, I'll just go ahead and tell you right now, my thoughts are way, way out in left field. So just fair
It's
warning.
all right.
And I'm not 100% sure on this, but what me got me thinking about this was Gilgamesh or Nimrod, because in the Ugaritic he's said to be two-thirds God. I looked into it. It seems like he's got at least one parent not from Earth. And so that got me thinking about the concept of this bloodline getting started back up. And Gilgamesh was around. This was apparently after the flood when Gilgamesh shows up. So I looked into it. Gilgamesh's mom is a Sumerian goddess named Nimsun. His dad was a deified king named Lugalbanda. So it got me thinking, okay, so it seems like Gilgamesh's mom is the otherworldly angelic whatever, the one that came down from heaven somehow. It's almost like the roles were reversed. So in Genesis 6 you have angelic male angels coming down and impregnating human women. With
Mhm.
Gilgamesh, it kind of seems like maybe it was the reverse of that, that his mom came down and got with a human king and had Gilgamesh. So
Gilgamesh. Yeah.
I was thinking like, okay, wonder what if the goddesses are involved. And how my whole thing with Ishtar, I think that she had some sort of a flying device. So I'm wondering if Ishtar and maybe some of the other goddesses helped the Nephilim get off the earth during the flood, or got them to safety somehow because they could go up into the sky. In the legends, Ishtar is said to be, she liked to fly the skies of Earth.
Mhm.
And there's indication that they had some sort of flying device, because with the Anunnaki and Sumerian tablets you see and carvings, you see that sphere with wings. I'm not going to go into all that, but it seems like they had some sort of a means of flying around in the sky. So I was wondering, like, what if this time around, because it seems like maybe the kingdom of heaven and those maybe outside of the kingdom of heaven who are rebellious knew better than to come down and sleep with earth women. What if these shady goddesses got with some of the earth men and the kings and started this bloodline back up? It's just a thought. It's
Yeah,
just a
yeah.
thought.
There's a lot of different there's a lot of different like and it's all gonna be us just guessing, right? Because we
Yes,
don't.
yeah.
So whatever your thought is on it is the same
Mhm.
as other people, because we don't know, because it's like the Bible doesn't let us know.
Sure.
All we do know is like after the flood, all of a sudden these giant tribes, they pick right back up, and
But
it's
we're
like,
looking at indicators here. And I like your theory of, that's kind of that goes back to Sodom and Gomorrah. That's an indicator there, right? Something else seems like something else was definitely going on there. So that's
yeah,
what I see with these goddesses that don't get enough, in my opinion, they don't get enough airplay, if you will. Like I think, because a lot of people think or just assume it's just God, Satan, and the fallen angels,
yeah,
and the good angels. I think there's maybe more going on than that.
what
So
you brought up on my show,
yes,
which it maybe would take reading into the other stuff than to have that take. I don't know, because
yeah.
I don't
Well,
know.
but
One thing
they're mentioned though. Like
in the Bible, yeah, yeah,
you've got
they're
goddesses
mentioned
mentioned all
as.
through the
Remember,
Bible.
remember we went through Psalms 81 or
Hmm.
82 verse 1. Yeah, so we went through stuff like
Yeah,
that. So yeah,
absolutely.
it's interesting. So
Well, I'll tell
however
you
they.
this, man. Like I'm going to let you get back on track here, I
No
promise.
worries,
But
no
like
worries, no worries.
one of the coolest things about this, one of the biggest revelations for me has been the bloodlines, because I thought it was I thought it was bogus. I thought it was fake. I was like, bloodlines, like get out of here, man. I was until I realized that these it's been happening for thousands of years. Royalty all over the globe follow a strict bloodline. They really do. And it's like, why would it's kind of dumb to think that they stopped doing that in the last 100 years. They've been doing it for millennia.
Yeah, and it's crazy
And it goes
because
back to these, it seems to go back to these gods and goddesses. They
even
trace
when you
their
study,
lineage back.
yeah, even when you study like the royal family, like you would think King Charles when he got with Princess Diana, you're like, oh well, she's her father was just he was the in charge of the stool, like where he would bring it, he would like pick
Mhm.
it up and then wipe they say like he was in charge of like her actual father, like her supposed biological father. But then you find out that her mom actually cheated with another man that had that royal bloodline.
Bloodline,
So
yeah.
she was part of that bloodline. So
Yeah, man. Well, that,
what you're saying is correct, bro.
Prince Charles is a good one to bring up there because people will know him from recent years. He I think right before he died, he commissioned that weird painting of himself. It's like blood. It's just a
Oh, he
totally
hasn't died
red.
yet. He hasn't
But
died yet.
he said twice in
Excuse
public,
me.
Charles did, that his bloodline goes back to Vlad the Impaler,
Yep.
who ruled in like Romania and Greater Romania. If you look into Vlad the Impaler's bloodline, he goes back to, I think it's the Scythians and another like an offshoot of a Greek family that produced Hercules. So it's like Gilgamesh, his mom is an actual goddess. If you look at the records, the historical records, Vlad the Impaler, his actual like great great grandfather was, it's said to be Hercules. Like Hercules was actually apparently there really was a guy named Hercules. Like his mom was, it sounds like alchemy, but I think it's alchemini, and his dad was Zeus.
Yeah. So
So you
it's
have
kind of like
King
that.
Charles who
Yeah. Yeah.
traces his bloodline back to what we've been told is mythology.
Yeah, and then the Committee of 300, they call themselves the Olympians, which means giants in the Greek, right? That's what they were called. They were called Titans. So
Mhm.
they're trying, and then you see like the Rothschilds, they say that their bloodline goes back to Nimrod, and then also
Well, people say,
King Charles.
how is it possible though? This goes back to your point. How is it possible that this could happen? And you just look at Genesis 6, man.
Yeah,
And Sodom and Gomorrah.
exactly.
These angels came down in physical form. They could eat, drink, and they could do other stuff too.
Hebrews, and then in the New Testament, we also have Hebrews 13:2, where Paul is saying, when you're entertaining strangers, you never know when you're entertaining an angel unaware. So now we have angels still coming to earth right now, where you're talking to someone that might be down on their luck, or someone that might be up on luck, whatever. You're talking to people that you don't even know when you're talking to an angel unaware. You see what I mean?
Yeah.
So make sure you're on your good behavior at all times with people and always treat them right, because you never know when you're entertaining an angel.
Hmm.
And that's to basically telling you that they're still walking among us to this day. Even Paul was saying that, right? So
Hmm.
it's not just Old Testament stuff where, oh, that only happened back in, before the flood, or that only happened in Genesis. Nah, man, that was happening. That's still going to be happening for us today. So we got to be careful, right? So,
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think I've had friends that I work with tell me stories that it seems like there may have been an angel involved and maybe even saving their life when they were in a pinch. I had I won't tell the whole story, but I was at work one time. I was doing like a security job and I was watching a packed room. It was like uh basically like we did like gigs like Luke Combs after parties and stuff like that. Just a packed house of people. And like I was there and some guy came up to me and he was acting real weird. He was dressed real weird. Uh, he like he didn't know what the right fit to wear and all this and that. And he had these like clear blue eyes. And he came over and he pulled me aside and he's like, I know you're going through a hard time right now. Um, I see you. I see what you're doing. You work harder than everybody else, and you don't always get acknowledged for it. He goes, just keep doing what you're doing. God has plans for you. And I'm
Yeah.
supposed to tell you that you're a good man and God has plans for you. And then he like walked around the corner and disappeared. And I don't know if that was an angel, but
Yeah.
man, it was out of the norm. And I think
Out of
maybe
the blue
sometimes
too.
we
Yeah.
do have these experiences with them. So I don't know, man.
Yeah, yeah, and that's a good point. And also know that there's not only like, good angels walking amongst us, but we're also dealing with, you know, the devil and, demonic and demons as well, right? So we got to make sure that we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but principalities of evil. So we need to make sure that we know that, even though we're
Yeah.
protected because we're saved, but still. But we'll go into, so what happened to the angels that sinned? We kind of touched on that. Now we'll go to the Bible to see what that is. 2 Peter 2 verses 4 through 11, right? So we have, for if God did not spare the angels who sin, but cast them down to hell and deliver them into chains of darkness to be reserved for judgment, and did not spare the ancient world, but saved Noah, one of the 8 people, a preacher of righteousness, bringing in the flood of the world to the ungodly, turning the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah into ashes, condemned them to destruction, making them an example to those afterward would live ungodly, and delivered righteousness. Now he goes into Lot. So we'll just stop there. But you see how he's talking about the angels that sinned and cast them down to hell. Now, if you look at that word in the Greek, it actually means Tartarus,
Mhm.
down to in the earth, right? They're actually chained in darkness, right? So that's interesting that Peter talks about that, thinking that everybody already knows that he's speaking of those angels, right? So we have that. And then we have, um, Jude is also speaking of this same account in Jude 1, verses 5 through 7. It says, I will therefore put you in remembrance, though ye once knew this, how that the Lord, having saved the people out of the land of Egypt, afterward destroyed them that believed not, and the angels which did not keep their first estate, but left their own habitation. Habitation in the Greek actually means okatarian. That's their heavenly body, right? And then he said, he hath reserved an everlasting change under darkness unto judgment unto that great day. And then he says, even as Sodom and Gomorrah and the cities about them in like manner, giving themselves over to fornication and going after strange flesh, are
Yes.
set forth for an example, suffering the vengeance of, so, and then it continues.
Oh,
So what I
so
want to tell you guys,
do you think that this is a nod to that your theory?
yeah,
Because
it, it,
because
it
it
goes
says
straight from the angels straight to Sodom and Gomorrah, right? So
yeah,
go
yeah,
ahead.
because it says indulge in sexual immorality and pursued unnatural lust.
Yes. And go on after strange flesh, right? So,
Yeah.
yeah. So, first, also an interesting portion would be that own, like the angels which kept not their first estate, but left their own habitation. So, they had a heavenly body and they left that, and they left their okatarian, which is their heavenly body, to get involved in this
Uh,
sinful act on earth, right? So, that's what he's talking about there. That's very interesting that they have a heavenly body. They shed that to come to earth, to come and sin and live like we live. Now we are humans trying to get to heaven. We're constantly trying to get to heaven, right? So we want to take this body, shed it, and go to heaven. They already been in heaven.
yeah.
Now they're shedding their heavenly body to come down to earth. So one thing we should get out of this from a preacher standpoint, preaching to you, we should appreciate that we have what we have. Appreciate being able to look your wife in the eyes. Appreciate being able to make love. Appreciate being able to have children, because there's demons right now that would love to be in your body just to feel that feeling of emotion that you get to feel. You
Yeah.
know what I mean?
Yeah.
So there's people that are killing themselves, and people that are depressed, people that are stressed out, and all these things. Not trying to talk bad about people, but I understand that there's situations, but there's angels that would love to be in your position, obviously, because they shed their okatarian just to come down and do that sinful act where they had sex with a woman. And they must have been beautiful for them to do this. Can you imagine risking it? There's a term for that people use nowadays where they say, like, they're not good enough to risk it all. These women must have been good enough for them to risk it all, dude, because they did, and that could happen. But my whole point to that is, they did I dipping in that Sodom and Gomorrah thing we talked about, that strange flesh part, and I like how Tim broke that down. That it says that the fornication first, which would be like the sodomy and that the orgies, yes, and to go after strange flesh, right? They didn't have to put that. All that Jude had to put was that they're fornicating, and people would understand that. But and go after strange flesh, which means like go after non-human, whether that's animal or that's angel. It seems like they were attracted to those angels, right? We see that in the book of Genesis. So that's just something I wanted to go over.
Well, what about what does it go on to say there? Because verse 8, it talks about the archangel Michael contending with the devil, disputed about the body of Moses. If you go down further, it says, woe unto them, they go the way of Cain. I thought that's an interesting phrase to see it, because that might go back to what we talked about with Cain, his his part in laying the foundations for there to be a serpent seed almost.
Yes, and understand that Jude is Jesus's brother too. So we're getting information and downloads from somebody that was brothers with Jesus.
Yeah.
And these brothers didn't believe he was the Messiah at first. Just want to let you guys know that. Now, obviously, by the time they wrote this, they know it, they believe it, and they know it for a fact. Okay, that Jesus is who he is. But when Jesus, when you go through and you see Jesus in his hometown, Jesus is not doing a lot of miracles and not doing a lot of things because there's non-belief to the point where it amazes him in a bad way. And he's not doing a lot of things. He healed a few sick, but he bounced because the people in his hometown were like, he's just a carpenter that came from Mary, including his family. So just want to put that out. But my whole point there is,
he should come down here and because people nowadays have no idea of the supernatural, man. Some people just don't even believe it exists.
Yes, and I think you were talking about something. Likewise, also dreamers defile the flesh, reject authority, and speak evil of dignitaries. Yet Michael the archangel in contending with the devil when he disputed over the body of Moses, right?
Yeah.
That right there too is like, bro, what is like this is interesting, right? So now the interesting thing is, Moses, obviously, God, probably had him buried somewhere good. And then one thing I would say I kind of get from this, one thing is if the devil was saying he was coming back for his body, which I thought was kind of like kind of weird. Like, why? Like, what does that mean? Why would he come back for it? You know what I mean? Like, and I thought that was interesting. But one thing I would say is that if they were able to get Moses's body, like, and let's say they did have Moses' body and he was in the grave and they had a temple. And I think at the same time, I think a lot of people would be probably, almost worshiping him, like they kind of like the Jews do. So that's one thing. But that whole thing is just.
But I've heard,
it was just interesting.
I've heard people also suggest that there was something that Satan would have been after to do with like maybe a chemical in his bones or something like that, because I think like Moses was said to glow, so maybe he came
down from. Yes, you're right. He came down from Mount Sinai after 40 days and 40 nights of fasting and speaking to the Lord, and they said he was glowing like almost like Jesus was when he was on the Mount of Transfiguration, right? It's like Jesus. They saw Jesus in his heavenly state, and they were like, "Whoa!" Like, and he was talking to Moses and Elijah on the Mount Transfiguration, right? So Jesus was glowing, where they were just like, even Peter and everybody was like blown away, right? Wild. Because they're seeing him in his heavenly state, and he's like kind of checking Peter, like, hey, calm down, like,
it's like there was like an alchemical thing that he may have been after there with Moses' body. I've heard that tossed around. I don't know.
Something's going on there, but I just think it's fascinating. And what does Michael say to the devil? He says, "The Lord rebuke you." You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And Michael doesn't say, "Let me get an AR-15 and blast you, devil," or let me get a nuke and blast you. No, he's using God's word against the devil. And that's the same thing we see with Jesus when he's on the mountain. And when Jesus is being tempted, Jesus is not pulling out a sword and fighting him like that. Jesus is using the word of God, which is the true sword, against the devil, and that is making him flee. You see what I mean?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
just point that out. But let's continue. This is a cool podcast. You know why? Because Tim is well versed, and then Tim also he gets involved. Sometimes I'm on shows, Tim, where like I'm doing a full download of information, and I ask the host, like, "Do you have any questions?" "No, you're doing great." And then I'm just downloading information, and then I'm like, "You're
Yeah.
doing great." And I'm like, "Do you want to talk about any of the stuff I'm
Well,
talking about?" "No, I'm good."
yeah. I'm known to jump in. I have to hold back,
I,
man, because
I like
I'll
it though.
totally I'll totally redirect the show if you let me. If you
It's
let
all
me,
right.
but no, but with this Jude, that's a lot of new stuff for me, actually. So I'm glad you went through that. There's a lot of new concepts there that you just laid out.
Yeah, and then we'll go to and then I also like to talk about like you know what's the counter argument to what we're talking about here. And I went over kind of all the things in the New Testament or the Old Testament that says like the Son of God.
Hmm.
The one argument that someone would have that goes against this whole sons of God went into the daughters of, and like it being like angels, is because Jesus talks about in Matthew 22:29 through 32, saying that they're kind of speaking to Jesus about, it's the Pharisees speaking to Jesus about like, hey, what if a woman married seven, like let's say like they had seven brothers, and then like she kept marrying each brother as they died, right? So who's she going to be married to in heaven? So they're trying to catch Jesus in a, always trying to catch him saying something wrong. And Jesus was saying, "You are mistaken, not knowing the scriptures nor the power of God. For in the resurrection they neither marry nor are given in marriage, but are like angels of God in heaven, but not concerning the resurrection of the dead." So what he's saying is saying that angels don't get married, right? They're not concerned with having children or getting married. So people would say like, hey, angels don't get married, so they're not able to have sex with these women, right? But what Jesus is saying here, like when the angels are in heaven, they're not marrying and all that stuff. They're not concerned with that when they're in heaven. But obviously what they did is they shed their Ocatarian and they came down to the earth.
Yeah.
It doesn't say when angels are on the earth. So you see that that's why I could kind of go from that argument and tell them like, look, this is what Jesus is saying, is they're not concerned with that. So you're trying to ask me a question and check me, but I'm going to tell you right now that in heaven, this is not, you're not concerned with that. You're not marrying women when you go to heaven. You know what I mean? That's not what your
Hmm.
job is. You know what I'm saying? So
Yeah.
that's something. So we talked about strange flesh already. We
What
talked
do,
about,
well, so you mentioned Amorites earlier. And
yes.
I just wanted to maybe throw this in because we were talking about at one point we talked about the giants here, the giant skeletons that were found that for whatever reason we don't know why, we don't necessarily know what happened to them all, but they're gone. But there does seem to be, like, if you look into the giants, there is a massive presence here in North America. It's all throughout the Americas. It's even South America. Hundreds of years of explorers came through, rode up and down the coastline, made stops, and they all wrote in their diaries about encounters with giants. Like the Americas was almost like infested with them at one point. And so I, I've always wondered, what if there's that Nephilim connection there to the giants that were here and the giants that were over in the Middle East? And throughout research, I've come to find it. I've found myself with these back at looking at these Canaanites and these Amorites. I think it's a term that's kind of used interchangeably in the Bible, from what I can tell. But Joshua drove a lot of these Nephilim Canaanite tribes out of the Middle East. Um, and what you see is then the Romans did as well, because the Romans did not like the Canaanites at all. They said they're vile. They said we can't integrate with them because they were savages. Probably, I think it had something to do with human sacrifice and cannibalism as well, as why the Romans
Yeah.
didn't like them. But what you see is the Canaanites, Amorites get pushed out of the Middle East. They move across the top of Africa. They get pushed all the way to the edge of Africa, and then a group of them gets on like stuck almost on the Canary Islands. And in recent times, we can trace that back to the Gaunches. They are said to be like blonde haired, blue eyed giant people. The Nazis were actually looking into them. The Nazis were very interested in their bloodline, I think. But what's interesting about where they ended up with the Canary Islands is there is a natural ocean current that runs from the Canary Islands over here to the Americas. So if these Amorites and Canaanites were to get pushed all the way to the Canary Islands and there's nowhere to go but ocean, if they hopped on the ocean, they could have just gotten a boat and probably just rode the ocean current here to the Americas. And I think it's interesting because specifically with the Amorites, they named themselves after their principal Mesopotamian deity named Amuru or Amuru. And I was just like, Amuru, America, Amaruka, America. I think there's a good chance that Amaru is what America was named after, and it goes back to the Amorites.
Interesting. I haven't heard that before either. That's very interesting. So this is another time about the Amorites since you're mentioning them. And I was just pulling up that verse and you were talking about Joshua, so that's crazy because I was just about to bring this up too.
Oh, hey, one more thing. They had blonde hair and blue eyes too. The Amorites.
And yeah,
and
that's what the Germans
say that.
And that's what the Nazis were trying to
bring
out, that they wanted to bring that to that everything you said right there is all stuff that's like, it's like, damn, bro, it's very fascinating, man, because that's the Indians, even the Native American Indians, like when you say how, like they're looking for six fingers. That's the reason why they said how. They didn't say how because they wanted to. They said how because then they put their hands up to see if you have five fingers. If you have six, then they know you're a giant. That's one of the Native American things. And so if the giants were in Native America, like Tim is talking about here, where they said they were like able to run fast and pull like a buffalo's leg off and eat it. That's the kind of stuff you're hearing from Native American tribes where you're like, wow. So
there's all kinds of cool little traces all throughout history. I mean, and like when they left the Middle East, it's crazy because they were in a region where they could go up into Europe and eventually get down to Spain, or they could go around over the top of Africa and get to the Canary Islands. And they're basically at the same jumping off point to come over here, because I think that Phoenicians came from that bottom area of Spain as well. So you also had the Phoenicians and I think the Minoans coming over here too. And I think that they were intermingling with that Nephilim bloodline. So you had possibly multiple ways that giants ended up here, but for sure, I think those Canaanites, man, because they were said to be white, essentially, with blonde hair and blue eyes somehow.
Very interesting. Yeah. And Amorites, so like there's a time where God got involved again, and this is Joshua 10, verse 12. It says, then Joshua spoke to the Lord in the day when the Lord delivered up the Amorites before the children of Israel. And he said in the sight of Israel, sun stand still in Gibeon, and the moon in the valley of Ajan. And the sun stood still and the moon stopped till the people had avenged their enemies. Is it not written in the book of Jasher? Which Joshua is actually pointing you to the book of Jasher, which is interesting. So the sun stood still in the midst of heaven and did not go down about a whole day. So my point to this is God is getting involved. He's stopping the moon and the sun from moving until they avenge their enemies. And these are the Amorites, which the Amorites are the king of Bashan. It's mentioned in 2 Amos 10, where it says they were like as big as cedars. So Amorites are a giant tribe. Okay. There's also like, Anak, the descendants of Anak are another giant tribe. The Horites is another giant tribe. The Horites is interesting because Esau actually married a Horite. And what happened, when Isaac was speaking to Rachel was saying, hey, well, Jacob's going to marry outside of the Canaanites, but Esau married in the Canaanites. So it's kind of like
Esau married a Canaanite woman and I think like a straight up Nephilim girl from the Horan tribe,
yeah, the Horites. Yeah, exactly, bro.
which
Yeah.
is crazy, man, because and I'm not gonna go into this
And
right
then
now,
And
but
then Ishmael's line as well. He
yeah,
married one of
yeah.
Ishmael's descendants as well.
There's a lot of crazy ties with Esau because Esau was the first Edomite. And so, and when you look at who his wives were, you know that there's that Nephilim bloodline now for sure involved with the Edomites. And you see them moving to Petra. Petra was an Edomite stronghold in the Middle East, which is crazy. If you go to Petra today, they don't tell you that. They tell you it was another group of people who founded it. It was actually Edomite. So, like, long story short, I think a lot of this old watcher technology, ancient knowledge, just a lot of even mystery school stuff was held at Petra for years and years and years.
Mm. Yeah, and also King Herod was an Edomite too.
Yes.
So that's a
Yeah,
royal line, right? That's a royal
right.
line.
When he built the
So
second temple, it looks like he sent some of his masons or Freemasons over and early Templar over to kind of guard Petra because it's like fortress. It's like one of the most defensible places on earth. They could have stored all their wealth there and all their secrets there.
wow,
So and
that's very
it's
interesting, man.
crazy, man, because it fits into Petra kind of fits right into this period of time that Dr. Joseph Farrell pointed out, where there's a gap from 300 AD to 1100 AD, where all the occult stuff goes underground until it's like revived by the Templars in the 1100s. So Petra fits perfectly. Petra and Constantinople, also another very defensible place in Turkey. Those two areas fit perfectly in that timeline when all your mystery school stuff, your Freemasonry, your all the stuff goes dark,
Your
kind of goes underground.
Mithraism, yeah, yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
and they were
yeah.
actually having Christian church up here while the elites were meeting downstairs and worshiping Mithra, the sun god. So there's a lot going on with that.
Hmm.
Yeah, dude, it's very, very interesting stuff.
Hopefully,
So,
I didn't throw us off too much with that.
no, 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 no. That's all connecting to what we're saying, bro. Because,
Oh,
knowing
can
that
I make one more
was one
thing?
too.
I want to say one more thing about something you said. You were talking about Bashan.
King of
Uh,
Bashan, yeah,
yeah, the King
talks about the
Og.
size of his bed. Yeah, King Og. Yeah.
What's interesting is talking about the giants coming over here to North America. If you look, you can Google Serpent Mound, Ohio, and you're going to see this huge ornate serpent mound that's still there. That serpent mound in Ohio looks a lot like the serpent mound in Bashan in the
Dang, I'm
Middle
gonna have to
East.
look that up. Serpent Mount. I don't want to.
So that's
I don't
all I'll
want to
say.
forget that. So,
Yeah, that's
um,
all I'll say. So we can keep going.
no, no, no.
But what you're seeing
I just
is,
try to put that in Google so I make sure later I can check that out because
yeah,
that's a very interesting connection, man.
um, you're seeing how the serpent mounds in the Middle East look like they were made and constructed by the same people who came to, it's the same people. It's people who did it over here look like they did it over there. And they all align to the solstices. Because you said something a minute ago about the moon and the stars. These people were worshiping the moon and the stars.
Yeah,
We
yeah,
we talked about that verse last time on your show
yeah.
where
We
it
did.
says when you look to the heavens, don't bow or worship the sun, moon, and stars and the host of heaven. These people, that verse is there probably because these people were very much into worshiping that. And that's what you see with these serpent mounts too. They're all aligned celestially.
That's what we're doing today too. We're doing the same thing. It's
Yeah.
like it's still
Yeah.
nothing new under the sun, huh? Like man, it's crazy. But I think you mentioned earlier the Numbers verse. Yeah, in the book of Numbers, what happened is they sent out a spy. My voice is going out, bro. I'm so sorry.
We're good.
Sorry about that, guys.
We can ring 15 more minutes out of you,
Yeah,
I'm
yeah, yeah.
sure.
Ring it out.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Numbers 13, when you read that, uh, what they did is so Numbers talks about like God told Moses to send the spies out. The book of Deuteronomy says that the people came to Moses. So, and what they did is they sent these spies out to survey the land. So, what it says is, we went to the land where you sent us. It truly flows with milk and honey, and this is its fruit. Nevertheless, the people who dwell in the land are strong. The cities are fortified and very large. Fortified is what you were talking about with these other cities too, which is interesting. Moreover, we saw the descendants of Anak there. The Amalekites dwell in the land. The Hittites, the Jebusites, the Amorites dwell in the mountains, and the Canaanites dwell in the sea along with the banks of Jordan. Then Caleb quieted the people before Moses and said, "Let us go up at once and take possession, for we are well able to overcome it." But the men who had gone up with him said, "We are not able to go against these people. They are stronger than we." And they gave the children of Israel a bad report of the land which had spied out. So they're basically telling all the people, they're giving them a bad report, like, "Hey, we don't want to go here. We can't handle these giants," right? And Caleb, which I'm named after, my name is Joshua Caleb. I'm named after Joshua in the Bible and Caleb. He's telling them we can overcome it because he has faith in the Lord, right? They say the land through which we have gone as spies is a land that devours its inhabitants, and all the people whom we saw in it are men of great stature. They were there. We saw the giants, the descendants of Anak, which it might say Nephilim in other Bibles. The descendants of Anak came from the giants, and we are like grasshoppers in their own sight, and we were in their sight. Now, are they exaggerating? Probably. They're probably not like grasshoppers, and these giants are 300 feet tall. But what happened here is very interesting. They're talking about the descendants of Anak and sons of Anak, which are giants, right? So we also have a few different people they mention, which if you go with Gary Wayne and kind of do his research, you'll see that the Hittites, Jebusites, Amorites, a lot of these Amalekites are a lot of giant tribes, right? So they're mentioning them here, and then they say the Canaanites. So interesting. Now, the very interesting thing is what God does. Caleb says that we can handle this. He has faith. The people of Israel are saying we don't want our men, women, and children to our women and children to die. So what God does is he says everybody that doesn't have faith is not going to be able to go to the promised land. But Joshua, Caleb, and then your children are going to be able to go. The ones you say are going to get slaughtered. But everybody else didn't get to go to the promised land. It was all about having faith. And people might say that that's a strong reaction from the Lord. But as I told you with Numbers 4, verses 4 through 8, God was speaking to Moses face to face. Going to Leviticus, God is actually present in the tabernacle. There's a lot of things where you should have faith no matter what, because God, you
Yeah.
can physically feel that he's there.
Yeah. I mean, when you look at the backstory, look at everything that's led up to this point, like they saw some of the biggest miracles mentioned in scripture. They were privy to all that.
Exactly, bro.
So, and what they would do is they would turn around and they would doubt God over and over and over again. So it was they were pushing God. That's what I always gathered from reading all this and getting up to Numbers. It's like, wow, they barely deserve anything he's given them because they've been so just disobedient, And I
He's
try
giving
not to
them
be too
manna,
hard
too.
on these people, these ancient
Because we're
people.
so bad too. Yeah, exactly, bro.
Yeah.
You're right. You're
But
right.
you do get the sense that they kind of like don't really deserve it, but it's a blessing that they're getting anyways.
Yeah, like manna. He's providing food for them every
Yeah.
day. He split the Red Sea, and then they went through, and then the Egyptians were about to get them, and the Red Sea collapsed on them. There's a whole bunch of stuff that's happening where straight miracles, right?
Straight
So,
miracles, man.
so yeah. So there's a lot to it,
Oh,
but
in my Bible, by the way, says 33, verse 33. So okay, it says the land that we have gone through as spies is a land that devours its inhabitants, and all the people we saw there are in great size. My version says, there we saw Nephilim. And
yeah.
then in parentheses it says the Anakites come from the Nephilim. So it gives me that nice little footnote. That's cool. And ourselves seem like grasshoppers, and so we seemed to them. I wonder what the original word there that got translated to grasshoppers is. I really wonder about that.
to grasshoppers. You want we could kind of
I wonder what the original.
I
I
wonder
wonder what the
too.
Hebrew was.
Yeah, we could kind of like at least see
Let me see. It,
Numbers 13. And can you tell me the verse that you read that part?
it's Numbers 13:33, the tail end of
33.
33.
Okay. And let's find out what grasshoppers is, right?
Yes, yes.
That's a good thing to study as grasshoppers. It says locust grasshoppers in the Strong's Concordance. Um, Probably a non-flying species is what it says in in the Brown Driver Briggs lexicon. Covers the ground. Said to be, yeah, it's basically says grasshopper. So I don't know
Okay.
what it
Maybe they had a Hebrew word
and
just
this
for
is
that.
not and this is not and this is not
It's
God
Kahagaba.
inspired. Yeah, Kahagaba. Yeah, so this is not like God inspired the Strong's Concordance. It's just something that kind of helps us because we don't really know. But yeah, that's a good point to check that out though and see, huh? Like,
Yeah.
what is that like? And it's cool, the great stature. It's almost like the men are renowned again, like that, all that. It's just it's fascinating, bro. When you read, but dude, when you read from Genesis all the way to the book of Numbers, right? Genesis through Exodus, Leviticus, and then Numbers, there's so many points, bro, where it's mentioning these giant tribes and these giants, and you see, and then once you get to the book of Numbers, you're like, it's like, wow, like this is
Hmm.
coming to the head, and then at Joshua it comes to a point, tipping point, where they're eliminating these giant tribes, and it's once you realize what's going on here, and you know the whole entire plot, and you know what's going on, is as you read, there's little points, like there's a lot of stuff that's like it's very difficult to go through, like the book of Leviticus, and and you continue to just drive and keep on going and going. You're like, and then you get to Numbers, like boom, it brings you alive again. You're like, oh, now I remember this part. I know what this is, and the Bible comes alive to you, bro. Like
Oh
that's the thing.
yeah.
It
Especially
comes
like
alive, like yeah,
and it all like you come full circle a lot with scripture. It's like down in this verse where it's talking about the Anakim. Goliath was an Anakim, right? He came
yeah.
from a line of
Um,
Anakim, I think.
so the Bible doesn't specifically say that, but what it is he was they got him. The Philistines got him from the land, like that had Anakim or
Oh,
Anak,
okay.
right?
I got you. Yeah.
So it doesn't specifically tell you that, but people that are even
It's
if you watch that
inferred.
movie, if you watch the inferred, there you go, Tim. Like if you watch the movie House of David, which is like on it's on Amazon. I just been watching it, and they said like he goes down, and this king goes to try to get a Goliath, right? The Philistine king goes and knocks on this big door, and the lady says, these are the sons of Anak. And then Goliath rolls out, and then he's like, she's like, this is our strongest warrior, right? And he's got five brothers behind him, right? So it's like they're inferring it through that movie, and it seems like he is a son of Anak. Okay, so like Tim is saying, yeah, that's what we're gathering, but it doesn't specifically tell us that. So I can't tell you 100% that I'm sure that he was, but it does kind of infer that he comes from their land and that he might be a son of Anak or from that line. So yeah, that's how I would answer that
And
question.
here's the weird one. Here's the weird one. Anak kind of sounds a little bit like Anunnaki. Just a little
Yeah,
bit.
yeah, Anunnaki, Anak, yeah, it does sound like it. Yeah.
Which, uh, that goes back to Gilgamesh's mom and Gilgamesh himself. They were Sumerian, and they were in their goddesses and gods were called Anunnaki in all the Sumerian myths and tablets. So it's possible that this is the same bloodline. It's possible,
Mhm.
or
There's some
branch off of it or
so
something.
yeah. Obviously their bloodline is coming from a heavenly being
Yes. Hmm.
mating with the human being, right?
Yep.
So
Yep.
it's yeah,
Had
it's
you ever
possible.
had you ever thought about that though? Like not to go back to this point, but had you thought about the it going the other way where like the goddesses are
I haven't I haven't
mating with the kings?
only reason why I haven't is because I haven't seen any like female
You're not seeing it in the
angels,
Bible. That's probably
but
why.
I do hear like Mother of Heaven talked about, and I know Ishtar is talked about. It's talked about in a way that these people are worshiping a
Yeah.
goddess, but I'm not seeing where I'm seeing a female angel, and I am of the one that I need it biblically proven.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I'm not saying it's not in the Bible because I still need to study myself. So once I see it, if I see it biblically, and then I'll believe it, right? But at this moment, I'm not 100% seeing it yet, but I haven't studied the Bible the same back in the days that I am now. So when I get to
Hmm.
that point where I'm reading about the Queen of Heaven and things in Kings and divine council and all this stuff, I have a whole different mindset, and I'm studying it in a different way, Tim, that by the time
Hmm.
I do get to those, I'll probably have a more open mind and understand of what's happening. And then I'll be able to see if these female goddesses that they do speak about, which is in the Bible, if it's a literal goddess. So, then I could connect that and say,
Yeah,
hey,
yeah.
maybe they
Hmm.
did do that. But that's it. And I'm open to it because I'm telling you, man, like before when I read the Bible, I would read it and I would just kind of read it just to get through as much as I can to say,
Sure.
hey, I read the New Testament, I'm done. Now I'm reading it like verse by verse, chapter by chapter, and trying to go through the Strong's Concordance, and I'm trying to like expound on it. And the Bible is, I'm way more passionate about it now so than I was before. So now when I'm actually going through these little sections and these portions, then it's more of a detailed account, and it's more of like studying like where I could be able to do that kind of thing, when I get to
Hmm.
that point. Does that make
Hmm.
sense?
Yeah, absolutely, man.
Yeah, yeah.
Absolutely. I'm really happy that we brought in this element of Cain and the idea that a lot of where humanity starts to go south or kind of goes wayward, kind of goes back to Cain, and I think it goes back to Adam. I think Adam was taught things in the garden that he taught his son Cain, and these are things that we might consider to be magic today or wildly advanced spiritual technology, just really cool like spiritual life hacks and all kinds of crazy stuff. I'm trying to find the correct term for it, but I think he was taught some things that we would basically consider to be magic. And then Cain goes and starts his civilization, which could be it's almost like it was like an Atlantean like civilization that he started. I'm not saying it was Atlantis, but it seemed like one of those types of highly advanced places. And it's crazy because all the mythologies around the world point to there being an advanced civilization like this, for instance. So, and then Cain has his son Enoch, the bad Enoch, and I think he continued those teachings through Enoch. That probably turned into the seven sacred sciences and the mystery schools. And so you see how you have this knowledge being passed down. Like some of it comes from the Watchers, yes, in Genesis 6, but some of it seems like it's coming from Cain as well. And
Yeah, think about this, like the when you have the type of faith that you have when you know God is real, like 100%, like
yeah.
Adam, then the things that you could do would seem like magic. Like Jesus, when he was walking the earth, like obviously his faith is going to be above everybody's because he came straight from heaven and he know God is for real, like no matter what. So when he's doing these miracles, it would even seem like magic. That's why the Pharisees would say this
Yeah.
kind of stuff is coming from Beelzebub, whatever he says.
Well, I think it would like what Adam was probably able to do might seem like magic to us. I don't know that he was. I'm not going to say that he was a straight up magician, and I
No, no,
don't.
no. I'm just
But
saying
I
like,
think I think that later on, Cain and his people were able to adapt that knowledge into magic and the occult and that kind of stuff for
yeah,
sure. I
well,
think.
immediately Cain murdered, right, Abel, right, and
Hmm.
then so he already committed that, and then and then he told God, and then God marked him, and then he went to like that city like you're talking about, and then all these sacred sciences came from that. So obviously he was already dwelling in evil. So yeah, there's bro,
Oh,
there's
and you can literally tie Freemasonry into this because Cain's descendants included Lamech. And
yeah.
Lamech had Jabal, Jubal, Tubal Cain, and Nama, which is another very interesting lady in scripture. But they were sort of Lamech's kids were overseeing this knowledge, and it seems like they caught wind of the flood was about to happen or something. So they stored the knowledge. And the legend is that they sealed the knowledge underneath one of the pyramids because the legend is that Bad Enoch built the pyramid. So this was like in their family. So they went down there, they stored all this knowledge beneath the Great Pyramid. And the knowledge that they stored down there was like how they created the pyramid and stuff like that. And if you look currently, if you look up a term called 9 vaults, if you just look up 9 vaults, what you're going to see is the Masonic tradition pointing directly back to these kids, Jabal,
Yeah,
Jubal, Tubal Cain.
that's like the same kind of research that someone like Gary Wayne would do and stuff. Like
Mhm.
he takes it back the same way that you take it. Yeah,
I mean,
so that's
and it's the Freemasons themselves saying that some of their traditions go back to Lamech's kids.
yeah. It's just
And then the pyramids get tied in. It's so wild.
yeah,
man.
and the pyramids also there's a portion in the pyramid where actually the the Ark of the Covenant would fit perfectly there.
Yeah, I could see
there's
that.
just stuff, bro, that is just, when you dig, it
Mhm.
blows you away, man. But we went through so much good stuff. So
Yeah.
we went through we already kind of went through the Raphaim. We touched on that. We touched on Sodom and Gomorrah, everything I would kind of go through. We touched on, the flood, why would even occur? Why would it even happen? Why there's people that would, kill the men, women, and children of a tribe, why God would even send them to do that, and animals. The men, women, children, and animals. If you look in the before the flood, God says that all flesh was corrupted, right? So
Mhm.
all flesh, so uh, all, and every thought was evil continuously of all people, not Noah and his family. Obviously, that's the those are the. But it says that every thought was evil continuously. So there was a lot going on before the flood. All right, so we touched
Yep.
on that. We also touched on pretty much everything I kind of wanted to go through. I think we touched on, and we
Cool,
already
man.
we did Psalms 82:1. We already kind of talked about that before, and yeah. So the conclusion to this would be just um, as as I was talking about, as you kind of go through the whole Old Testament, and then also you the New Testament, even Jesus says that the end times like are going to be like the days of Noah. When you say that term, days of Noah, to a Jew or a Hebrew Israelite, they're thinking of along the lines that we're talking about. They're thinking
Yeah.
about the giants. And then if you go to the book of Enoch, what are the demons are actually the disembodied spirits of the Nephilim, and they're going to be running rapid during the time that when Jesus comes back, or the end times, obviously. So we have that mixture. And if you notice in Jesus's time, when Jesus was on the earth, he's casting out demons left and right, and demons are saying he's the son of God, and that was like it was happening a lot. So just to let you guys know, in the end times, we could be expecting a lot of things like Tim is talking about, where they're trying to get that Nephilim DNA from Gilgamesh, and all this different stuff is going to be happening. So we have to be prepared. But knowing this little portion of the Bible, and then kind of studying the Old Testament to the New Testament, I think it's vastly important. And you'll see that it's going to open up some things to you that you just never understood before. It's just going to blow you away, and I just think it's important, and just
Yeah. Yeah, man.
fascinating.
And not to take away from your overall point there, because that's a good kind of wrap up kind of a point. But I want to point out, like, when you do look into, or if you look into that Gilgamesh, that's the recent story of Gilgamesh. Something is off, man. Something happened there. Like, I have the footage saved in my phone, and I watched the footage again because somebody went in the tomb of Gilgamesh and filmed it, and filmed him. And it's weird because he doesn't look like he's been dead for very long. Usually bodies have like a sunken in kind of a thing going on, like, or they look like mummies, or they look, but his eyes are closed, but it looks like he still has eyeballs underneath there. That's not typical, I don't think, for somebody who's supposed to be dead for. So, maybe they don't decay like us because he looked to be in good condition. And
Wow.
I mean, I just think that it's like it aired on the BBC. They covered it. And it's almost like somebody pulled the plug on the story, because now they act like it's not a real story, but they covered it on like global news. So I just think that Gilgamesh thing is wild, man.
Yeah.
Just want to throw it in there, you know.
Yeah, and like I said, extra biblical text and historical stuff and things that people are reading, it'll assist you to know the language and the thoughts and the process of people in that time. I concentrate my studies on the Bible, and then I do go into some extra biblical text sometimes to kind of just corroborate with it. But like Tim does, like he's figuring out certain things that maybe he can make connections with the Bible, and you know, hey, it just turns into the Bible just becomes alive, and you just realize, like, man, there's things in here that are just amazing, and Jesus is all over the Old Testament. Yeshua the Mashiach is all over the Old Testament. It's he's all over it, right? So it's building up to that point where he dies on the cross for our sins, and focus on like I'd say, man, just reading the Bible and staying in the Word. Focus on God, relationship with God, with Jesus, and I don't know if you want to be in a church and have fellowship with the church, awesome. If you want to just start out by just studying the Word, at least, building faith cometh by hearing, and hearing by the Word of God. I suggest you do that. But having a podcast like this is interesting, so that people kind of get a breakdown on different aspects than they're going to learn from church.
Yeah, and I appreciate you coming on today, breaking all this down, sharing some of your time with me. And,
no worries, man. It was fun.
Gave everybody a lot to think about. I'm sure you gave me a lot to think about here. So thanks again, Josh, and tell everyone where they can find you.
Yeah, so Josh Monday Christian and Conspiracy Podcast is going to be my show. That's going to be my on audio platforms, and then YouTube is Josh Monday Music and Podcast, and then, like I said, on Cult and Conspiracy, you're going to get just all Bible, and I'm just going through the Bible, Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers on the Old Testament, and I've gone through Matthew, and then I'm going through Mark right now on the New Testament. So the Wednesday side would be the New Testament, Sunday service would be the Old Testament, and it's kind of similar to what I just did today, and it's just interesting topics, and hopefully you guys will like it. But yeah, I appreciate you having me, Tim, and thanks for coming on my show too, bro.
Yeah, man. Yeah. We'll have to do it again sometime, and we'll just wrap it up with that. As always, break the mold, conquer the realm, and thanks for listening.